everyone, it's Cahn here from Full Drive Supercenter, and today I'm going to show you a super easy way to install a pair of LED reverse lights onto your vehicle that should cost way less than $100. This is an easy project that anyone with some basic tools can do. I'll go nice and slow with every step so you can follow along, but basically we'll be using a slightly modified driving light wiring harness to trigger the LED lights off the factory reverse light wiring. Plus there's a switch so you can manually turn them off if you want. Now the first thing you're going to need is a pair of lights. I'm using Adventure King's 4-inch LED light bars, but you could use any 12-volt LED lights for this. LEDs are ideal because they're tough, long-lasting and put out plenty of light while drawing less power than halogen bulbs. The next thing you're going to need is a wiring harness. I'm using an Adventure King's driving light wiring harness, which is going to give you about 95% of the wiring that you'll need for this circuit. Finally, you're going to need a couple of extra bits and pieces. About 4 or 5 meters of 12 AWG wiring, I'm using red and black, plus about the same length in a thinner 20 AWG wire. Some solder, electrical tape, corrugated tubing, heat shrink and cable ties. For tools, I'm using a pair of side cutters, soldering iron, plus a drill, an impact driver, a test light and a lighter for the heat shrink. You might also need some spanners or Allen keys, screws, silicone, thread locker, spray paint and cloths, a crimp terminal, crimpers, plus drill bits depending on how you want to install your setup. Now the first thing I'm going to do is fit these lights to the vehicle. Of course they come with the mounts and all the hardware you need if you're bolting them on. However, I'm going to use a self-tapping screw so we can fit it directly to the tow bar. That's going to involve drilling a pilot hole and then using an impact driver to mount them up. An easy way to see what drill bit you'll need is check on the back of the packet of screws that you're using. Now it's a good idea if you've mounted your lights like this to touch up any bare metal to prevent corrosion. Clean off the dirt and grease, touch it up and then let it dry. An impact driver makes this nice and easy. Adding a dab of silicone over the bolt head to the flat surface will help prevent the self-tappers vibrating loose. Then we'll use the captive nuts in the back of the light, line them up with the slots and use the included bolts to mount it all up. First things first, I'm going to use a little bit of thread locker. Again, that's to stop these bolts vibrating loose over time. These lights come with the Allen key you need to tighten them up, so that's pretty cool and makes it nice and easy. Rightio, we've got the lights mounted and the next step is to work on the wiring. Now as I said before, the good thing about getting a pre-made harness is that it's super easy and it's generally more affordable than if you wanted to build this yourself. Now this harness has your relay, plus your main power leads with a fuse holder. It's got 2 Deutsch plug outlets, a switch, and it's got your trigger that would usually go into the back of the high beam. We're going to cut that, pull it through the sheath and extend it out. That way, instead of using the high beam to trigger driving lights, we can use the reverse light wiring to trigger the LED reverse lights. Just dealing with the red wire, cut it as close to the plug as possible to give you extra length to work with. As I said, I'll need to run this to the back of the vehicle. Now that we've cut through one end, you're going to need to open up this heat shrink and pull through the other end. In this harness, the trigger wire runs from the high beam plug all the way back to the relay before heading to the switch. I'm taking advantage of that extra length. I'm going to run the wire directly from the switch to the back of the vehicle. Now, the important thing here is just to keep it nice and straight while you're pulling it, so it comes out a lot easier. With that easy little mod done, it's time to install the harness, but before I do, I'm just going to pop the fuse out so nothing is live while we're working. You'll need to find somewhere to mount your relay so that your main power leads can reach the positive and negative terminals of the battery. I reckon we're going to go just about here. Again, you can touch up the bare metal to protect it here too. Next, I'm going to plug this relay harness in and then I'm going to run the wiring for the switch. There's a grommet down here which is going to make it really easy to run these switch wires through the firewall and in behind the dash. Most vehicles have rubber grommets in the firewall where existing wiring runs through. In this case, there's a grommet down here. but we're gonna have to pull the switch off before we do that. So a good tip is to take a photo of the layout of the wiring before you pull them off so it's easy to put them back together. Another great tip is if you're having trouble running the wires through, try using a thin bit of metal like a straightened out coat hanger, tape individual wires to it, poke it through, grab it from the inside and pull it through. It'll be done in no time. I used the same idea to run the wire behind the dash. Now there was an old hole for a switch here, but I've had to open it up a little bit to fit the new switch. Plug the wires back in as they were, click the switch in, and that part is done. Now with the switch installed in the dash and ready to go, it's time to focus on the power for your LED lights and the trigger switch, which both need to reach the rear of the vehicle. Being a ute with an 1800 tray, we're going to need to extend these. If you've got a smaller vehicle, or depending on the position of your components, you might not need to. I always like to use heat shrink, so that goes on first. Then I'm soldering the connection, but you could crimp it if you wanted. That's the trigger wire done, then I'm doing the same for the main power wires. I want to keep the existing wire joins under this heat shrink, so I'm gonna cut it just back here. I've cut and peeled back the sheath, then stripped the wires, adding heat shrink first, then soldered the joint and used the heat shrink over it. I've added another piece of heat shrink over both to protect the joint from moving or bending too much once it's installed. Now that I've extended and joined the wiring, I'm gonna put it inside this corrugated tubing so that when it's under the vehicle, it's well protected. I've trimmed this to length with a couple extra inches at the end. Feeding this down the firewall and then along the chassis rail helps to keep it neat and out of the way. Plus, it's a good idea to follow existing wiring. And definitely keep it away from anything hot or any moving parts. I'm also taping the corrugated tubing about every 8 inches, then cable tying it to keep it in place. For the moment, I'm keeping them fairly loose as you can tighten them up and trim them right at the end. With the power and trigger wires run to the back of the vehicle, the next thing I need to do is re-solder the Deutsch plugs on that I cut off earlier. So a good tip here is to plug these into the lights so you know exactly how much you can cut off to make it all line up. Again, I'm using solder and heat shrink for these joins. With those sorted, I need to figure out where to hook up my trigger wire. I want to connect it to the positive power source for the reverse lights. Now, if you've got a factory wiring diagram or you want to trace the wiring from the back of your taillights, you can do that. Otherwise, grab a multimeter or test light so you can find the wire you need to hook the trigger up to further up in the harness. Now, you might have noticed there that 2 different pins were lighting up my test light, the top right and bottom right. So I've turned off the reverse lights just to double check which one lines up with those reverse lights. So this top right here has a constant feed of power. Bottom right is the reverse lights. So plug this back in to find the wire that's connected to that pin, and in this case, it's the black wire. Because I'm using the trailer plug wiring, I can double check that the black wire is used for reverse and it's spot on. So again, I'll cut, splice, solder and heat shrink my trigger wire and patch it into the black reverse light power wire. Then for extra protection, I'm taping the whole bunch. Next, I trim the corrugated tubing for the power wires and tape that too. Then a final tidy and tape. I also tape the relay harness at this point to protect it as well. Now with everything else wired up, the last thing to do is connect directly to the battery. So you've got your positive and your negative. It's just a matter of connecting those ones up. Then the only other thing you can do is if you want the LED in the switch to actually illuminate, you'll need to connect this negative wire that we originally trimmed off. So all I'm gonna do is cut it like that and crimp on a terminal. Now you could solder this directly into this negative power cable, but as I said, I'm gonna use a crimp just because it's nice and easy. We can go straight onto the battery. Make sure the terminals are nice and tight. We'll throw our fuse in here and give it a test. There you go, everything is working as it should. Now this project is probably beginner to intermediate level. It's not overly difficult, but there are some fiddly bits and pieces, including some soldering, and you've got to run those wires underneath your vehicle. So set aside an afternoon or a good couple of hours to make sure you can do this properly and make it neat and tidy. If you've got any questions, make sure you throw them in the comments below so I can get back to you, or check out some of the other videos I've done for your 12-volt DIY tips and tricks. And hit subscribe for even more 12-volt full driving, camping and cooking videos too.